Okay, guys, joining me now, co-author of Who Believed in You, which he wrote with his wife Dina, Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick. Dave, good to have you back, buddy.
Hey, Don, good to be with you.
So I guess I'll start by noting that Pennsylvania was truly the Keystone State, not just in name, but in the November election this last time around. You had an incredible campaign defeating a very well-entrenched political machine in Bob Casey. He's been there for like longer than I've been alive.
30 years.
Yeah. Okay, fine. I'm a little older, but but basically most of my life that I remember, at least. How is all of that translating into strategy and momentum in the United States Senate? Obviously, the way we look at a map in advance, this was the last kind of cycle we had a chance to make some gains. Although, there's looking like there could be some other stuff coming on right now that didn't look quite as favorably 2 years ago. What are you seeing in all of that in the Senate?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was, as you said, it was just an epic campaign. And as you recall, it was my second one. I had lost a close one by 900 votes. And this one, your dad obviously spent a lot of time on Pennsylvania. I think he was there 15 times. Mm-hmm. And I was with him every single time. And so I had a chance to campaign with him across the Commonwealth. And a couple of things were happening. One, it was a change election. Where your dad and I were talking about the same things, but essentially getting the country back on track, getting the economy back on track, inflation wildly out of control, a border wildly out of control, 4,000 fentanyl deaths, this incredible fight and attack on fossil fuels, which is incredibly damaging for Pennsylvania, law and disorder in our cities. So your dad ran on that change agenda, and I ran on that with him, and that resonated. That was first thing. And of course, because your dad mobilizes people, the turnout was fantastic. That was a big deal. The second big deal is Pennsylvania's becoming red. We made huge progress in voter registration. We made huge progress with mail-in ballot. Your dad was part of that. We put a huge amount of money into that. And the reason I call that out is because that's going to be important for the future in terms of making sure Pennsylvania continues to be in the red column. And the coalition your dad built, which was great turnout of African Americans, Hispanics, Jewish voters in Pennsylvania, the trade unions. I'm at a trade union facility today, and the trades probably voted 65, 70% for your dad and for me, despite the fact that the Nationals had endorsed Harris and Casey. So it's that combination of things that led to the victory. And in one sentence, I think the key to our success is delivering on the promises. And your dad is going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The rest of us are trying to keep up with him. But that agenda that he promised and that I promised, we got to deliver on it. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, you mentioned, the first time you ran, you lost by 900 votes over the entire state of Pennsylvania, guys. Just so we understand, these are, basis points. Right now, one of the things I actually just use this as an opportunity to create a little bit of awareness up in Wisconsin. There's a really important Supreme Court seat that's coming up. I guess it's the first week in April. And our people right now are they're happy. We're getting stuff done. Doge is cutting the nonsense. We're winning. We're trying to get peace talks going. So our people are sort of sitting there. So you have this, Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that could literally tip the Supreme Court, which would then lead to redistricting, which could cost us 2 seats in the House. And no one in Wisconsin that's conservative, basically, knows about it. I went up there with Charlie Kirk, on last week, on Monday, and it was the people were super excited about what was going on, but so few people realized that, oh my God, this could be a tipping point. It's literally the keystone of the Supreme Court. Doesn't go right or left, which is going to be every major decision. You have a radical leftist that wants men and women's sports, doesn't want us deporting, criminal murderers and illegals. And it's they don't even know because they're happy with what we're doing. We have 2 races in Florida for both Mike Waltz and Matt Gaetz, replacing those special elections also in April in Florida. And we got polling back. And it's if the districts knew that there was a special election, we'd win in a minute. But there's 2 seats, the old Matt Gaetz seat and the old, Mike Waltz seat that we could lose because people aren't even thinking about it. They're not paying attention. So that's a note to any of you. If you know people in those districts, And then them up in Wisconsin, make sure they get out and vote because, like you said, an entire Senate seat could be lost by 900 votes over a big state like Pennsylvania.
Well, that's the thing. And your dad, helped us all by getting out the vote. And, he mobilized people and other people on the ballot were the beneficiaries. That's not going to happen.
Correct. In the future. Yeah. Without Trump at the top of the ballot, it's not quite the same. There are literally single vote Trump people. We gotta not do that because every time you don't vote because Trump's not on the ticket, it doesn't matter. Like there's a Democrat out there voting for someone whose agenda it is to make sure he doesn't get anything done. So we have to stay engaged.
You're so right. And in my case, there were 7 swing states, and we lost the Senate seat in all 6, lost the Senate race in all 6 except Pennsylvania. Yeah. And your dad has a funny riff on this because he's introduced me a number of times. He stands up there, he says, I didn't think he could win. I didn't know he could win, and I won by 15,000 votes. So just to your point, I mean, these are in these swing states, and I'm the 53rd vote. If I'm not there, Pete Hegseth doesn't get confirmed. I mean, that's how 100%.
I mean, they had to, I was dealing with that one heavily that day too. From people on our own side, they're like, "Well, we're going to do your family a favor." And not, I'm like, that's not helping my family. I promise you. Like, not voting for our cabinet, it's not doing my family a favor because that was overusing the keystone, but that was the keystone for all the other people behind it. That was the first confirmation. You lose that one, all of a sudden, the rhinos in the Senate become emboldened, and they don't vote for anyone, and you're stuck with you end up with like a first administration type cabinet instead of the group of rock stars that we have right now.
That's right. No, to your point, we've got to stay focused on solidifying what I say is solidifying the coalition that President Trump won with in 2024. And in Pennsylvania, I'm working hard to do that. And, just what you said, I think it's going out on offense every day. Mm-hmm. Here was the mandate for change, and we're delivering on the promises. And, Doge is a good example of that. I described it. When you see what's happening, it's clear that our spending is a runaway freight train, but our bureaucracy is a runaway freight train. It's taken on a life of its own. Correct. It's made decisions that are completely at odds with our voters. And people say to me, well, but there's a lot of good spending in there. I'm sure there is good spending, but it's like when you go into a good restaurant.
Probably not.
And you lift up the plate.
At this point, I'm too much of a cynic. There's probably not a lot of good
there's
spending.
There's some good spending. But you lift up the plate in a good restaurant and you see a cockroach, and it makes you not want to eat anything in the restaurant. Yeah. Right? You lose faith.
Correct.
And what I think's happening from Doge is that the American people are seeing some crazy stuff that their taxpayer dollars are being spent on. They're saying, I have lost faith in the ability of this bureaucracy, these bureaucracies across the different departments, to allocate my precious tax dollars in a way that makes sense to me. And you can't do this. I mean, I was a CEO of 2 companies, Don. You can't do this incrementally, 2% of the time. You got to be bold. You got to make drastic changes, and I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I mean, Dave was a serious business guy, very high level, dealt with real stuff. One of the few people probably in the Senate that actually understands how real business works, how the entire systems are there. So, I guess that maybe that leads me to sort of the next question. Last week, you saw Chuck Schumer, I guess he was on The View, saying, people, they don't want to give the government half of their money. Like, it's almost like they earned it without us. And I'm like, oh my God, like he really thinks the government is like a 50-50 part. Like, I don't know. Government hasn't helped me much. I know the government's tried suing me a bunch of times. I know they've deposed me a lot. So, I guess they've built a couple of roads. But like, other than that, I don't think they've done all that much for me that, it's worth half of what I bring home. But it seemed like such a terrible mentality. I mean, looking at this, why would you want to create efficiency? I mean, you don't deserve the choice of what to do with the money that you give us because you didn't earn anything without us. And it's like, oh my God, I can't. They're saying it out loud. It's like Obama, you didn't build that. It's like, actually, like. I know they didn't build it. It's the government because they've been too focused on Trans Elmo in Guatemala, and gay Sesame Street in Iraq, for real. Where do we go?
First of all, I think it just that contrast between a guy who spent his entire life in politics, and you grow up in the government and you're a hammer looking for a nail, you think the government's the answer to everything, you lose touch, versus a businessman like your dad who has a whole life of career of success, of tough choices, that can come in and say, this is madness, or Elon Musk who can come in and say it's madness, or somebody like me who it's so antithetical, so crazy compared to the world that we know that you start to question everything. I think that's the first thing. The second thing that's happened is this progressive ideology. It's become entrenched. It's become ingrained in our government, and it's one of the reasons when I was campaigning with your dad, I would say, and it's starting to happen, you not only need to downsize the government, you need to take these pieces of the government and move it out of Washington. You need to put the Department of Energy in Pittsburgh, right? Because that's where it's going to be in touch with the people it's actually trying to serve. And I think what happened with Chuck Schumer is just an example of why the Democrats keep fighting your dad on 80-20 issues. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're fighting on 80-20 issues, which 80% of Republicans are with your dad, 80% of the country is with your dad, is because they're only hanging around with the 20%. Yeah. That's the world they live in, is the 20%. And that's why the Democratic Party, unless it has a real come to Jesus, is going to be lost for the next generation.
So, I guess, maybe the one guy, on the Democrat side that sometimes actually speaks a little common sense is actually, the counter co-part of the elder statesman in the Senate, even though he was only there, a couple, 2 years before you, John Fetterman. Every once in a while he makes sense. And I made a lot of fun of him because I watched that debate with us and I'm like, wow, this guy felt brain dead at the time. And maybe he wasn't. Maybe he's recovered a little bit. Maybe he's smart enough to tell people what they want to hear, which the Democrats often do. They tell them what they want to hear and then they go do whatever sort of the special interests tell them. But he has at times stood out as a reasonable voice in the Democrat Party. Although, when it comes time to vote, it's often a very different story. What's your relationship like with the senior senator from the state of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman?
We're off to a good start. We went and sat down and talked early in the first couple of weeks, and he basically is very candid. I trust him. I think he's a very authentic guy. I don't think he'll surprise me. And he basically said, listen, we disagree on a lot, but there's a lot we agree on. And he goes, I'm at the point in my life I almost died. I just want to get stuff done. I mean, I'm not worried about the politics so much is getting what I believe done. And so on Israel, on anti-Semitism, on supporting your dad, for example, on the taking the $400 million from Colombia, he has been a voice of reason on manufacturing jobs in Pennsylvania. He is a voice of reason. He was the first co-sponsor. I just introduced a fentanyl bill. That was one of the things I promised to create this focused multi-agency task force that would, bring the focus and the accountability to China and Mexico and others. He was the co-sponsor of the bill with me. He says, listen, this fentanyl thing is out of control. He supported your dad on the border, where he said, listen, every month we have every week rather, we have the size of Pittsburgh coming across our border. That's madness. So on a lot of things, he seems to be in the right place, and I think he's going to be a good partner. And some things we just totally disagree, and we just said, listen, we're not going to agree on everything. So I think he's going to be a good partner. He's still a Democrat, and he still believes a number of things on economic policy that I think are not what I believe, but I think he's a good, authentic man.
Well, listen, you obviously know a lot about economic policy. You were in banking for a long time at a really high level, very successful. So, specifically, I know you're doing sort of a lot of work on, the debanking with the Biden administration really weaponizing the idea of reputational risk to basically almost incentivize banks to target conservatives. How do we end that insanity once and for all? I mean, I imagine anyone who's watching this show has dealt with it. Anyone who's tried to buy a gun has dealt with it. Anyone, you were targeted by banks if you bought Bibles or anything MAGA related or within 1,500 miles of D.C. on January 6th. How do you deal with it? Because it does feel it was a totally one-sided attack, on conservatives around the country. And, it was definitely promoted and incentivized by the Democrats. Yeah,
well, there's legislation that Senator Scott just proposed to essentially take the whole idea of reputational risk off the table. That's essentially what happened, which is we just had a closed hearing with the bank CEOs and with a bunch of regulators. The regulators would factor in this thing they called reputational risk, and they'd give advice to the banks. You have to You have to debank people based on that. Of course, the banks weren't exactly a profile in courage here either.
No, if you were a trans communist, you could have a credit score of negative 900 and we'll give you a loan. I mean, who cares if you don't pay it back or ever have the ability to do it? We have to check off that box. So it was total BS, by the way.
Exactly. You got fault on both sides. You have regulators pushing this idea. You have banks succumbing to the pressure and just capitulating. And so we've got to basically hold banks accountable for behavior that's consistent with debanking based on political beliefs or some political agenda. We have to get the regulators out of the business of talking about or even considering reputational risk. We have to take that off the table as an issue for banks. And listen, I think there's been a lot of bad behavior across the board on this. I think this was part of a broader woke agenda that was internalized by a lot of corporate CEOs. They failed to stand up to this political pressure, and they got themselves in a place where it was absolutely indefensible. I did this meeting the other day with the business roundtable, like 200 CEOs, and they asked me, what advice do you have for CEOs? And I said, well, listen, I mean, let's be honest. Nobody has to say anything. Let's just be honest. If all of you could look back on the last 5 years and how you dealt with the culture wars and wokeness and all that stuff, wouldn't you want a do-over? Didn't you all handle that for the most part terribly? There's some exceptions, but didn't you for the most part handle that terribly? And there was nobody who stood up and said, yes, I handled it terribly. But I think the consensus was that they lost their way, and banking was just another example of that. And we need to pull people back to good behavior and hold them accountable when they're bad.
I think that's so important and something that definitely means a lot to so many of the people that watch this show because they've gone through it, including myself. But
yeah,
last week on Capitol Hill, you also had, National Agriculture Week. So Pennsylvania, along with many other key states like Wisconsin and Ohio, really have critical farming sectors. How vital is it, and how do we, protect these industries and protect the American, businesses around them, whether it be, again, from crippling regulations, foreign acquisition? It seems to be such a big part of the MAHA movement, making America healthy again, doing it organically with small farms, without big ag, without the chemicals in there. How do we, promote and, get those businesses really rolling?
Oh, you're so right. In Pennsylvania, it's a $160 billion industry. It's the number one industry in Pennsylvania, and it's the biggest employer. And so we got poultry, we got broilers, we got egg layers, we got hog farmers, we got across the continuum. And so number one, food security is absolutely critical. We learned during COVID what it was like to be dependent on China for semiconductors or for pharmaceuticals. Man, we gotta control the food supply. So we gotta own those farms. China has been on a rampage of acquiring farmland. One of the things I said in the campaign, in fact, your dad was there. We had an ag event. We both talked about not letting China and restricting China and other countries through the CFIUS process of buying, the foreign investment process of buying farmland. We've got to make sure foreign competition is on a fair playing field. This is where your dad's concept of reciprocity in trade is really important. I was there the night that he hosted Trudeau at Mar-a-Lago. I was at the table, and Trudeau was saying, listen, after they got through the 51st state thing, Trudeau was saying, listen, we're open to U.S. goods. And I said, well, no. Let's talk about dairy. I'm from Pennsylvania, right? Yeah. So our dairy farmers can't sell any milk into Canada because of all the non-tariff barriers. And all
it's like almost 250%, right? I mean,
yes,
but what they do is it's a catchy thing in the law, and the media doesn't do it. I think the first case of milk, there's like a 3% tariff. So you're like, okay, fine, that seems reasonable. Every case after that is like 250%. So they basically, no, it's a 3% tariff. It's like, no, it's a 3% tariff if you only send one case of milk, right?
Exactly.
It's something like asinine like that. Like, it's not even an exaggeration.
Food security, stop foreign investment, stop foreign acquisition of farms, make sure our farmers got a fair shot around the world, and make sure we got good farm policy. Brooke Rollins, the ag secretary your dad selected, is just fantastic. I talked to her yesterday. Yeah. She's coming to Pennsylvania in the next week or so. She is going to be a leader on this, and she knows the kind of support our farmers are going to need to remain competitive and protect our food supply. And I'm with you on the Make America Healthy Again movement. I think that's a huge part of doing a lot of things, including reducing our healthcare costs, which, as you know, are ballooning out of control.
Yeah, but you get people healthy with natural foods. You're not having to take care of them forever with, doesn't exactly please everyone, but should please Americans.
Exactly.
Dave, what steps do you think the Senate can take, or, how can you work with the executive branch to solidify some of our key supply chains? It's sort of interesting to me that if an American company wants to make a big acquisition in China or Europe, they push back on it. It's basically impossible. Try buying a Ford in China, whatever it may be. Try manufacturing, other than for export, which they also tear. But, for how far and for how long have we just let this go unchecked? How do you get that back? You had an incredible career in the private sector, in the banking sector. What has that taught you about how government can address and encourage business instead of trying to undermine it?
Well, listen, I think the idea of bringing back good paying jobs, good men, I grew up in a house where my mom and dad had both gone to college and got master's degrees and doctorate degrees. So I grew up thinking the only path to a career and a good life and so forth was to go to college. Mm-hmm. And I have learned that college is probably not the right thing for even half the people, maybe a lot less, that there's great careers, great opportunity in skilled labor in making things. And in America, due to decades of stupid policy, we've lost the capacity to make things. We've lost the capacity because we've let foreign companies essentially savage our industries because of subsidies they've had or unfair trading practices or unfair labor standards. Mm-hmm. We've let these skills diminish because we don't support with the GI Bill skilled labor. We don't support with Pell Grants skilled labor, the kinds of things where, a kid can go and become a welder and, have an $80,000-$100,000 a year job in their early 30s, which helps them, do whatever they want in terms of owning a house, the American dream. So your dad is very much on the case. It's going to require multiple things. It's going to require getting control of inflation because these businesses can't prosper if inflation continues to chew away at their profit. It means fair trading practices, reciprocity, like your dad talks about, making sure the American worker gets a fair deal. They get a fair deal, they're going to compete over and over again in a way that wins business, making sure we double down on skilled labor, these great opportunities for a skilled workforce. I'm trying to make a big focus, and your dad has promised to help me, of making Pennsylvania the place that energy and these big AI data centers come together, because welders, pipe fitters, steam fitters, those jobs that go along with those data centers are enormous. Philadelphia shipyards, another area where your dad's made a big focus, and I'm making a big focus. These are the things we need to do to make sure that manufacturing base, advanced manufacturing, becomes much more vibrant.
That's 100% right. And, I think you're right. There's so many people that went to college and then they expect the plumber that did do the thing responsibly, that didn't take on, $500,000 to, get a degree in gender studies, that, did something that can actually pay out. And then they want them to pay for the education that they sat there and wasted.
Yeah, with loan forgiveness.
It's an incredible mentality, but I guess it's just so indicative of the left right now.
Yeah, no, that was a good one, because you go on the campaign trail and you talk about loan forgiveness for, these people went to 4-year colleges and everything else, and the people paying for it are people that either paid off their loans or chose not to go to college and pursue a trade. It was just absolute madness. But again, it's an 80-20 issue.
Yeah, well, the irony was that the ones who couldn't figure out how to get by and couldn't figure out how to pay their loans, they're the ones that consider themselves the elites. I'm like, I don't know, you don't seem that elite. Like, you're a grown-ass person. They can't take care of themselves. Like that. I don't know. That's right. Not all that elite, after all. I'd like to see them change some pipes in their house or something like that, because then you'd see how far less elite they actually are. So.
I don't want to talk too much, because I'm afraid if there was a pipe to be changed in my house, my wife would be stuck.
The one thing that I have going for me with that, from that perspective, I don't do much of it anymore, but just coming from a real estate family, my dad's whole thing was like, hey, if you're going to build a building, you better damn well know how to do it. So we worked on job sites. So I have done all of it. I'm probably not as good as I used to be, but I can do it all.
That's good. That's good.
So, Dave, as we look abroad, how do you sort of define the Trump doctrine? What do you see as sort of the foreign policy mission? We're seeing countries in Western Europe attacking J.D. Vance, going after my father over Ukraine and Russia, while so many of these countries are just opening up their borders, destroying, essentially, in my opinion, their civilization, pushing censorship and eliminating free speech entirely. How do you see it, and how do we stop that from metastasizing all over the world?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot within the context of the debate over Ukraine and all these other things. And I think, I listened very carefully to what your dad says. And I think there's some basic tenets that I hear him say over and over again, which I think define it, at least in my mind. Number one is the concept, and I think it's absolutely critical, is peace through strength. Mm-hmm. And the notion that America is going to be the most powerful economically, most powerful, lethal military in the world, but a country that is going to use that power, military and economic, very judiciously, mm-hmm. very carefully in pursuit of America's interest. So the connection between what we do abroad and how it helps people at home is unequivocally clear to everybody. That's the first tenet. I think the second tenet is a fairness tenet. We talked about this in the context of trade, but it's in geopolitics, in military affairs, national security. The idea that if America is going to offer its protection, if America is going to be the source of stability in the Asia, in the South China Sea, or in Europe, is the foundation of NATO, that those with whom we protect, those with whom we ally, need to do their fair share. They need to step up. And deals we made 40 or 50 years ago to help people get off their backs after World War II are not the right deal of today. And that the idea of entitlement that so many countries have around the world in their relationship with the United States, that connection has to be broken. That's the second. And the third is, I hear your dad laying out a vision in the United States of what common sense policy looks like in terms of creating a vibrant economy, in terms of making sure the American taxpayer well protected, essentially getting rid of that progressive ideology that's entrenched itself. Mm-hmm. And I think the other countries around the world, particularly in Europe, are many years, maybe decades behind, where that entrenched economic socialist philosophy or that progressive ideology is going to destroy their countries unless they are able to make the same turn. You see bright spots. You see bright spots of conservatism popping up. And I think those three pieces, we're going to project our ideals abroad by what we do at home. We're going to have peace through strength, but with a focus on America first. And we're going to make sure our allies step up and are true friends and allies, not entitled countries that take advantage of the United States. That, to me, is what our president's talking about, and what he's laid out so clearly.
So I think you were with him this last weekend. You have a new column out about growing up in central Pennsylvania and the lessons you learned wrestling. You wrestled at West Point. Talk more about that, and how did it relate to your book and how it's shaped your worldview?
Yeah, I'm so glad your dad came for the Nationals. He had gone in Oklahoma. Yep. This is the NCAA Division I championship for college wrestling. And, during the campaign, the Penn State wrestling team it's the best Division I sports team in history. 11 national championships in the last 13 years, came up on the stage with him. So your dad gets an incredibly warm reception among that group. But in Pennsylvania, I grew up, a part of Pennsylvania, up near Scranton, mm-hmm. wrestling in hot, smelly high school gyms called Shikellamy and Shikshinny and Schuylhaven and Selinsgrove. And man, you learn a lot about life and a lot about what makes America great, about hard work, about the courage to step into the ring. It's 6 minutes. There's nowhere to hide. You learn about resilience, because everybody has to fight through getting beat, or everybody has to fight through getting taken down and show real toughness. And you learn about respect, mm-hmm. because after you spend 6 minutes beating the tar out of each other, you have to stand up and someone gets their hand lifted in the air and you shake hands and walk off the mat. So I think a lot of what's great about America we see in those high school gyms in Pennsylvania. And that's what the column was about in the Wall Street Journal. And I think it's emblematic of, the community and a set of ideals that your father really hit on the campaign. And one of the reasons I think he has such a great following in Pennsylvania.
I mean, you also ran an ad during your campaign about how wrestling taught you to make the hard choices. What are those hard choices right now in the U.S. Senate? And what will your benchmark be for success in this Congress?
Well, I've got a whiteboard in my office, and on it I have the top 10 things I promised. a lot of the same things of your dad, some different things that were Pennsylvania specific, but a lot of the same things. And I literally look at that whiteboard when I come in every time and say, okay, what are we doing on that? Okay, fentanyl legislation, we propose that. Okay, term limits, what are we going to do on that? Okay, getting the economy back on track. What are we going to do to have energy dominance? What's the permitting reform agenda? I'm looking at that list and say, hey, that's what I promised. And I want to hold myself accountable to everything I promised. That's the first and foremost, because I was very specific in the campaign. Your dad was incredibly specific. I was too. I think he won and I think I won because people knew what we were going to do. They had known him before, and he had obviously done great things in his first term. For me, I think they were betting on the promise. So I want to deliver on the things I promised. I want to help your dad deliver on his incredible agenda, is an important voice in the Senate. And I want to be the guy that when Pennsylvanians think of my name, they say, that guy is everywhere. He's fighting for us. He's working for us. Nobody's working harder. And I want them to know, and this is genuine, Don, that I feel honored and privileged to do it. I genuinely do. I've had a great life. I've been very fortunate. I feel like this is really the honor of a lifetime to have this chance.
Well, that's awesome to hear.